Hello and welcome to the Bad Take. My name is Tamara.
And this is Himal. Today we have with us a very special guest.
We have Nisansa de Silva, who is actually visiting from the US. He's on a short holiday here, I think.
Yeah.
So
Vacation.
how's it going, Nisansa?
Pretty good. It's nice to be back after 3 years.
Nisansa, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a graduate student right now, but I'm also a lecturer at the University of Moratuwa who's on leave. The summary of what I am is that I teach, sometimes computers, sometimes students.
Nisansa talks to computers. That's what he does for a living. He specializes in machine learning and what else?
Natural language processing.
Right.
So
Pretty hardcore.
We actually recorded the previous episode with Nisansa, but we unfortunately had
Because
to...
someone didn't have the time to edit it. So, yeah.
But then again, the audio quality was not that great, so we decided we're going to fly him in.
Yeah. Just for this episode, we flew him in.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So today's topic is connected to what Nisansa does in his everyday life.
Artificial intelligence.
Everyone is building an AI-powered app or software these days.
So-called
right?
AI.
Yeah.
at least they say that they are.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Very true.
I have to think that it results in investors and consumers and a lot of stakeholders being misled.
Yeah. And don't forget all the media that
Yes.
eat it up.
Since Nisansa is an expert in this field, we decided that he could clear some things up for us.
Yeah. So starting off, what is AI?
AI basically is artificial intelligence, as you know, and the initial objective was for computers to do what humans do, at least as a replacement and so forth. So some of the terms that we use within AI, which we'll get to later, such as Android, are pretty old. It comes from a Greek myth where there is a mechanical contraption of a human doll which can do various tasks. So that's why we call human-like robots Android. The resurgence of AI is because now we have better computers and we can put into practice some things that were initially proposed in the 70s and were deemed failures, such as neural networks. At the time that they were proposed, they were a failure because the computers were not powerful enough. But now that we have powerful computers, what we call AI and what they can do has shifted in a great deal. And I suppose the future is now converging with science fiction.
Okay, so we have given Nisansa here very strict instructions to, keep his explanations free of jargon and explain things to us noobs in the most basic of terms. So just to interrupt you there for a second.
Yes.
Explain neural networks.
Before neural networks, let's look at a neuron. A neuron is a approximation of how a biological neuron works.
Right.
What a biological neuron does is it will take in certain inputs from its synapses and do, let's say, a calculation and fires it out. So a basic neuron would do something similar. It would take in weighted input. So whatever the input that you have, you multiply it by a certain value and then sum it and then apply a threshold. If it is more than some value, so it's a very simple mathematical unit. And a neural network would be a network of multiple units of these. So the power of neural networks depends on the configuration that we have. So the most basic one is called backpropagation, where you set up a mesh of these neurons and ask it to learn something. And how it learns is that it initially takes the input and does a prediction, and then obviously there would be an error. And then we say, we have to propagate the error backward to assign blame to each of these neurons. So then each of those neurons, when according to the blame that was assigned, corrects itself, saying, okay, next time I'll do differently, right? So then we do next time, and then there would be hopefully a smaller error. So the backpropagation algorithm, what it does is it's a hill climbing. So you start on the edge of the hill and try to climb the hill. So each step you are closer to the summit. So that's what basically happens. It reduces, if you assume the heavens to be the perfect answer, and when you reduce the error, you will summit the hill. And maybe even at the top, you might not get 100%, obviously. I suppose that would be the explanation of how the most basic of neural networks work. But there are more complex ones that have memories and so on and so forth.
What is the current status of artificial intelligence development?
We do not have AGI, as in, depends on what you call real AI.
So let's differentiate
Yes.
between AI the way we understand it through, like, say, science fiction, as to, like, actual applications of AI we see in the real world.
Right. The AIs that we see in science fiction are what some people call true AI, or what some people call AGI, so artificial general intelligence, where the AI is able to simulate a human, or even if it is not simulating a human, it can do anything that a human can. All the AIs that we see in pop culture, like Terminator, or the Star Trek AIs, or Star Wars AIs, all of these are capable of doing what a human can do. So we are not at that point yet. What we can do is we can solve very particular problems, and possibly with retraining we can solve some other problems. That doesn't. So, for example, a system that is able to drive your car would possibly not be able to give you medicine. So there is an argument there as well, as in some people say, oh, that's fine, because you would not expect your driver to be your doctor. Therefore, maybe it is okay to have a specialized AI, and we can call them general AI as well. So you have, if you take a human who has done, let's say, A-levels, and if you learn one way, you would get something else, and if you go the other way, you would get some another specialization. So maybe it is okay. So definition of AI itself is fuzzy. So that's fun for the AI researchers, and I'm sure that some people might not get it, but still.
Okay, we're dropping inside jokes now. Okay, cool.
Because fuzzy systems
I'm
are
just gonna pretend
AI
to get it.
yes.
Yeah, like, it's hilarious. Okay. Very clever fun there. Okay, so like in the media we see, like, constantly, like we hear stories of AI being used for, like, everyday to solve everyday problems.
Yes.
That's not, is that really AI, or is that like a kind of a glorified if then if else algorithm that's being labeled an AI?
Right. So that is what used to happen a lot.
Right.
For example, there is AIML, which used to be very popular.
What's
back in the day.
AIML?
Artificial intelligence markup language or modeling language, depending on what you say. So that was basically, let's say, it's a list of questions and answers. It's a structure, and when it is used to create things like chatbots, and these chatbots written with AIML is only able to answer those particular questions. So if this question asks, give this answer. We'll get back to that when we discuss the Chinese room and so forth. So then there was a set of systems which we called expert systems, where an expert would sit down and write down the rules that are relevant to the domain, and then it is given a database. For example, let's say a pharmacy system. And then when a person asks questions, it will look at its rules and dataset and give an answer. Again, this would be a glorified if-else structure. So still this stigma of AI is just if-else is prevalent. Then came the era of, revitalization of what I talked about earlier, the neural networks, which are basically learning machines, where the human would say, okay, this is the data, this is your structure, so the structure you can change. Go ahead and learn. Again, you might say, given the structure of a neuron itself, it is again an if-else structure, because when you are applying a threshold at the most basic level, again what you are doing is, if the sum of these parts are greater or smaller, do something. So you can even deconstruct that to if-else and still complain, you are still in the if-else era. So it again depends on what kind of leeway that you are willing to give to AI or the AI scientists and whatever. It's very possible for us to say, okay, the directly human transcribed AI, ML or expert systems might not be AI, but maybe the ones that at least have a small amount of self-learning would be AI. I personally like to say like that, but I know that there's going to be a whole lot of people who would disagree with me on both sides. Some people would say, no, even the written down ones, the expert systems and AI, ML are AIs. On the other hand, there would be people saying, okay, just because it learns, you cannot call it AI. It has to be more complex than that. So it's this father, son, and the donkey situation where no one agrees what it is.
So at the outset, you said that the purpose of most AI research is to like build systems that can do stuff that humans do, right?
Yes, that is the overarching. It's the holy grail.
Right. Yeah.
Of this particular research field.
So the way I understand it, where we are now is we have systems that can do information processing very well.
Right.
What is the gap? What is the gap between stuff that a human can do and information processing?
Humans can generalize. Well, some AIs can generalize as well, but the idea is, again, the AI people do not take that as the jargon word. I use the common word when I say generalize. So in this context, when we say generalize, it's that if you create a system that can do something, it should be able to do something else. As for example, you might teach a human to walk, and you might not necessarily teach the human to run. So the human should be able to figure it out by itself. This might not be a very good example because they are very close. But the basic idea of a human or any animal is that they would be able to, given a new scenario, they would be able to solve it. But on the other hand, if I take the previous example itself, if you take Tesla's auto-driving system and ask it to, do the job of Alexa, it wouldn't do it. So they are very specifically trained to various things. But if you take a human who's been driving a car and ask the human, okay, can you be my secretary? The human would be able to do that. So there is that gap, and there are various reasons for this. One is we do not understand how human brain itself works, so that we can copy it. And on the other hand, there is a fundamental difference in how humans think and how machines would think. The little computational points would work. One main thing is that humans do have many computing points, as in neurons, than a microprocessor would have. Also, humans are better at multiprocessing, as in, like, for example, you might suddenly forget something, right? You might have a discussion and then you forget that. But after a few hours, when you are having a shower or something, you will remember that. That's because that thought has been running under the wraps in your head so far, and the search has been completed, and you get the search result. This happens because the human brain is what we call massively parallel. Even with our best supercomputers, we cannot approach that level. So a direct copy-paste might not help at this point. So we have hopes, because recently Google said that they have achieved quantum supremacy. They don't have a reason to lie, but, they do have many reasons to lie. But if they haven't, a lot of our problems would be solved, and we would get a lot of new problems.
Right. So is it correct to call the brain a biochemical processor?
I would call that, yes.
Right. So we are basically trying to replicate that using silicon process, right?
That is the idea behind neurons, yes.
Right. So the fundamental architecture of it, like the makeup of it is different, but we are trying to get to the same place.
Right. What we did is we replicated the most basic unit, but not the overall structure. As in, like, we would have billions of connections between our neurons, and we nobody has even tried to put, okay, a human brain has this many neurons, and these are all the connections that it has. Let's attach those and try, because it's intractable. It's too expensive a thing to do right now.
How far away is true AI or AGI as you call it? Like what's stopping us from getting there?
Currently, our bad understanding of biological brains and certain issues with computation, as in it's not enough, and also there are problems that are currently mathematically unsolvable. So we call them NP hard. To give an example, let's assume there is a door-to-door salesman, and so this is called the traveling salesman problem. And we want this person to go through a certain number of cities without retracing his steps. This problem has been proved that it is NP hard, as in polynomially, not polynomial, and hard. The idea, I am struggling to not use any jargon from computer science or mathematics.
You can think of us as like entry-level students or something.
Right.
Or like,
So what happens is, in mathematics, if there is something, some solution or a problem, it is possible to reduce other problems to that problem.
okay.
Right? They're saying, okay, here's a problem and I can't solve it.
Right.
That's problem A. And then there's problem B that is very hard, and we look at it and say, maybe I can simulate problem A using problem B, and thus prove that because A is already proved untraceable, then B is untraceable as well. So that is a system of mathematical proofs that we do, as in, okay, we try to, if something is hard, if it seems difficult, we try to see whether it can be reduced to one of the previously solved or unsolved problems. If it is a solved problem, we have the solution. If it is an unsolved problem, we know that it is unsolved and unsolvable right now. So
you kind of break it down to solvable or unsolvable
problems,
yeah. And then extrapolate from that.
Yeah, let's say. So let's try a mathematician joke to see whether this will work. So an engineer and a mathematician went on a trip, and the fridge caught on fire. So the engineer took a water bucket and threw it on it, and the mathematician was like, okay, fine. The next day, the table got on fire, and the engineer did not wake up. What the mathematician did is that he lit the fridge on fire and went to sleep. And the engineer woke up and put it off and said, why did you do that? So the mathematician said, I reduced the current problem to yesterday's problem, and I know that you know how to solve it. So that is the way of solving certain problems in mathematics.
Right.
If you can reduce it to a previously solved problem, you know how it is solved. And if it is unsolvable, you know that it is unsolvable right now. So, okay, so that was a long-winded explanation of NP hard. Similarly, given that we get the inspiration from a lot of mathematics stuff, we also have something called AI hard. So AI hard are problems that are only solvable if and when we have AGI, right? So some of the problems that we have can be shown to be reduced to AGI, AI hard problems. So let's say fully functioning certain natural languages would be AI hard. People used to think that driving a car was AI hard. So again, as a computer science, not a computer science, engineering joke, the mathematician would say something is inachievable, but the engineer would say it is, for all practical purposes, it is good enough. So that is what's been happening in most of these cases. So the systems that are built are good enough. So we'll get to that question as well when we get to the ethics bit.
That was going to be my next question. Okay.
Right, because humans try to try to keep the AI on a higher standard than they would put a fellow human in. Right. We'll get to that. Yes.
So no, I mean back to my question earlier. Now, realistically, how far away is AGI or artificial general intelligence, or is that achievable at all?
It should be achievable, given one thing: we have the if, as Google said, we have achieved quantum superiority, and the thing is, you know Clarke's second law, right? If a scientist in a certain field says something can be done, it can be done. If he says it cannot be done, most of the time he's wrong. I would personally think that it is achievable, but it is possible that is not within next 100 years.
Right. So, what is the generally accepted definition of intelligence?
So that moves on to philosophy.
Right.
Who would we consider intelligent? So there are two things, right? There is sapient and sapient, right? Sapient with a T is self-awareness. We might call all animals sapient and plants not sapient. It's possible. But humans, by our scientific name even, sapien. That means we have other ideas about existence and so on and so forth. So a sapient animal would be averse to harm and so on and so forth, and a sapien would be probably self-aware, and that I'm an individual and so on and so forth. So it's possible to look at AI in this point of view as well and think, okay, whether it is sapient or sapient. And you can say, okay, until it is sapient, it is not a being or something.
Right. If I may interrupt you there for a second,
yeah, sure.
Why are we trying to define true AI like in very human terms? Isn't that a very human-centric approach to it?
Yeah, anthropocentrism.
Yeah.
Yes. See, that's the only thing that we have. We are confined by the limitations of ourselves. Anything that we define would be how close to our definition, or how close to us would be if and when we encounter either aliens, as you discussed, or we develop AI and have a peer to compare it with. This is the only reference point that we have. If we did not kill and eat all the Neanderthals, we would have had a reference point, but we do not.
Right. Yeah, even in science fiction, like all these machines are anthropomorphized, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Agent Smith or Terminator or Replicants or whoever. Like it's always based on a human structure.
Except for Hal. Hal is
Hal is a box.
Yes.
Hal is a box.
Yeah. Another thing that would be easier to understand what we would call an AI is one of the founders of AI, Alan Turing, created something called the Turing test. So the Turing test is that you have two closed rooms, and in one closed room there is a human, and in the other there is the AI, the box. Yeah. And outside there's a person or persons. They would ask questions, so have a conversation with the rooms. And then if there is a point when the outside humans could not distinguish between the AI and the human, then he says, okay, it has achieved artificial intelligence. So that is or that used to be the litmus test to say whether something is intelligent or not. Now there are people who are saying, okay, it is not enough to put them in a blind box. You have to put an android and sit it there and have a conversation. And if you are unable to say that it is a robot, then only have they achieved full AI. So it depends. For example, my supervisor believes that, as in he doesn't believe if a computer talks to you and the computer says something and people think that is enough. That is, he doesn't think that is enough.
You mean it has to look like a human?
Yeah, that is. Okay. So it's various people.
Right.
But initially, Turing's idea was that if it is inside a room and if it is indistinguishable, that's enough.
Yeah. So that's like Westworld kind of.
Yes. So my supervisor's idea was Westworld kind of idea. Yes.
Okay. But in where I'm not a huge. I've only watched like season 1. Are they those are true AI, right?
Those are very true AI.
Okay. but within limits though, right? Is there there are no limits to the capacity?
No.
Okay.
Other than the restrictions that if we are going to
You can program restrictions into them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't been following the show.
No, you are correct. Yes.
Okay.
So they have complete memory wipes, and they have commands that you can give to stop their work, and there are beliefs that are ingrained so that they would not comprehend certain ideas, like they would not try to comprehend that they are AIs and so on and so forth.
They don't have agency.
The whole premise of the series is people, some of them developing agency.
Right. I guess the next question would be like, what would be the ethical implications of AI? Like for example, the trolley problem.
Right. This came up with the MIT study on self-driving cars.
The moral machine.
The moral machine, yes. So what happens is that if something wrong happens. Okay, before going on to that, let's talk about why in all science fiction that there are parallel worlds. The hallmark of that is that you go to the parallel world and there are blimps, and the reason that is such a point in Hollywood to say, okay, in the parallel worlds we would have blimps, is because in this continuity in our world, the reason blimps do not exist is because of the Hindenburg incident, right? And it was a very specific incident. The reason Hindenburg happened is because Germany wanted helium, and the biggest helium exporter was United States, and they said, okay, we are not selling helium to you. Therefore, they used hydrogen, and then on that particular day, there was rain, and there was a leak, and a whole lot of improbable things came together for that disaster. And also there was sensationalism in how they reported it. And if I remember correctly, it was less than 50 people who died. Yeah. Now, when a plane crashes, there are hundreds of people dying.
But there was footage of it, and it looked like it looked disastrous. Yeah.
Disastrous, right? So that is the reason why commercial blimps are not widely available in this world. And that is why in parallel universe you show it to have blimps.
Yeah,
right.
I actually never thought about it. You're right. In many of these stories, you get a lot of blimps.
So the reason that I mentioned this is that when it comes to technology, people tend to sensationalize and keep it in a higher standard than humans. So when a self-driving car gets into an accident, it is publicized more, saying, a self-driving car ran over a person. But when there are thousands of human-centered accidents happening, which are more severe and so on and so forth, and they do not get sensationalized. And it's very dangerous for the development of, let's say, self-driving cars, because that would hinder, just like Hindenburg. Right?
Wow. Oh man, okay.
Right?
Moving on
from that. So it was vital that that the researchers make a point that the system doesn't necessarily have to be better than humans. As long as it is as good as humans, that is fine. So this particular MIT study, what it did is it did a massive global survey of what people would do in a trolley problem adapted to this particular scenario.
It's still going on, right? You can go to the website.
And answer. Yes. So you have a car. So if you are the AI in the car, who would you say? Whether you would ramp into something and kill your passengers, or would you run over some pedestrians? Would the idea change if you are driving two elderly people and the people who are there are young executives? They are children.
Should we very briefly recap what the trolley problem is for anyone who might not know? Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Okay. The most basic trolley problem is that, so you are at a juncture of a railway, and a trolley is coming without brakes, and on its current path there are 5 people tied, and on the other path that you can diverge into, there is 1 person tied. If you do not take any action, the 5 people will die. If you take an action, as in if you pull the crank, that 1 person would die. Is it okay? Will you pull the mechanism. That is the question. That is the trolley problem. So the moral quandary is that the first one, you might say in a utilitarian point of view, 5 people versus 1 person are. On the other hand, you would also say from other ethical views that you do not have any blood on your hand. You did not take any action. And on that view, you would say that the one single person who's dying, you basically killed that person. All right? So that is the basic trolley problem. There are variations. This is the most basic trolley problem as to whether or not you will take the action to divert the train from the 5 people to 1 person. So that's what they adapted into the moral machine as to where should the AI kill its passengers by saving the people who are crossing the street, or should it kill pedestrians and save the passengers, and so on and so forth. Maybe it can be also be 2 groups of pedestrians. So what they found out is that the answers that people give are very specific to region. For example, in Japan, they would save the old person and kill the young person, and in the West, they would kill the old person and save the young person. So not only would the AI would have to learn how the human would think, it would have to be regional as well, because as it seems, so the first point is, first humans have to understand that, okay, we'll have to settle for human level competence from the AI, not superhuman. Even if they do, something that would cause outrage in West would not be the thing that caused outrage in the East. That whole study, it's available to read, and it's pretty interesting. And there are data on Sri Lanka as well. So they have classified each of these countries as in what we call is a hierarchical clustering. So hierarchical clustering is you have all the data points and you cluster the ones that are most close to each other. And then you look at the clusters as points and cluster them together as, so you build a hierarchy of things that are closer and closer and closer. So apparently Sri Lanka is closest not to India or Pakistan or Maldives. We are closest to Singapore, as in from our ethical point of view.
Right.
Chinese room is again a philosophical question as to whether something has learned something or not. So the question is, let's assume that you do not understand Chinese, and I put you in a room with all the questions in the world in Chinese and all the answers, all the matching answers in Chinese. So you have a bunch of books. So you are in the room and a person who can speak Chinese comes and slides down a Chinese question. And you, being a person who do not understand Chinese, would just look at the symbols and match the symbols in your massive amount of books and find out the exact question and draw the symbols that are for the answer and push it through. And the person who can understand Chinese, who gets the answer, would think, this person answered my question. And then the question is, you did not understand Chinese. So if a system would do something like that, if it simulates, if it learns pairs of questions and answers, can we say that it has learned? So this is a challenge towards AI that people throw at us, saying, you have just given it pairs or patterns and so on and so forth. How can you say that it has learned? Is it not just building a elaborate Chinese room inside itself so that it can answer? So again, this is a divergent issue on whether we could call the learning, which I mentioned as a grand decider of what is AI or not, even true. So initially when you asked whether it is a if and else or learning, and I said, okay, maybe learning things are actual AIs. And now the question is, are they even learning? So again, it is an unsolved question where people argue a lot. So that's basically Chinese room.
We hear a lot about the Uncanny Valley when it comes to human-like robots.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit, please.
Uncanny Valley is that it's about it's a graph between human acceptance and how close to anthropomorphism the thing is. If it is something like Alexa, which talks like a human, but it doesn't look like a human, then people are pretty okay with it. And if it is like Westworld androids, which perfectly looks like humans and perfectly works like humans, people are also okay about it. But Uncanny Valley comes in between, where it doesn't exactly look like human, or it doesn't exactly work like human, but it has the other quality. If it looks very much like a human and does not speak like a human, work like a human, then people find it uncanny. On the other hand, if it works like a human but it doesn't it doesn't look like a human, then again people would find it uncanny. The example that I forwarded is it's cats. So the reason that the people were so upset about it is about the anthropomorphized cats is that they look enough human and cat. If they were, I know that you have your problems about Lion King, but if they were if they were that way, Lion King like cats, as in like actual cat looking cats, this Uncanny Valley problem would not have come. On the other hand, if they actually look like people dressed up as cats, like the stage production, again this problem would not have come. So since it is in the middle, that this issue has come. So it's the same thing that happens with AI with even Sophia. Sophia is a product, if I remember correctly, from OpenCog and some other research foundation. The basic idea of OpenCog is to create AGI. Dr. Ben Gosel and some other people. So the idea of Sophia is that it has it looks like a human person and it answers your questions pretty okay, but it has basically creeped a lot of people out.
Is that because of the Uncanny Valley?
It's mostly yes, because it's halfway true to both, I guess, because it looks reasonably human, but you can note that it is not human, and it gives good enough human answers, but it is not completely human answers.
Right.
Again, it's a very personal issue whether you get creeped out by Sophia or not.
Oh, she looks a lot like that character from Ex Machina. Ex Machina, the film.
Oh,
yeah.
right. Ex Machina. Yeah. That's true. So yes, so she sometimes makes jokes as in like I want to kill all humans and right. Yeah. And she got citizenship in one of the countries in Arabian Peninsula.
Oh, okay.
And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. First AI citizen of a country.
Yeah, she looks a bit creepy. Actually, I'm looking at pictures right now. Yeah. No, I mean I can see what you mean about the Uncanny Valley. It's it's like kind of oscillating between
human and machine. Yeah.
So in your prediction, Nisansa, like in your estimate, since you work in the industry and all, how like you said it would take at least 100 years, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It depends on if the Google's thing works out very fast, but.
What is Google's thing? Like
they said that they have quantum supremacy, as in like they have a functioning quantum computer.
They do
in the most basic idea that is the thing. So it's also a lot of problems with the aforementioned untractable NP hard problems and so on and so forth, and it creates some other problems such as all the unbreakable passwords can be broken now. So yeah. So so
they are in possession of such a computer right now.
They claim they claim that so they might not have the fully computer. So basically, what you need is a stable building block. So I think they have the stable building block. It's not like they have this entire computer running. I don't know whether they have it, but that is not what they have already said. So they have the ability to do it.
Okay. So right. Google was the first. If the claim is correct, they are the first.
They are the first people to claim to have quantum.
A quantum computer. Okay.
So what does something that like look like physically? It's certainly not a humanoid robot. Like, is it like a set of computers? Like, what is the physical appearance like? What is this? Where does this AI live?
Oh well, we wouldn't know, right? We wouldn't know where our sapiens, our intelligence or whatever lives either. As in, we know it is in the brain, and if you damage the brain in certain ways, it would change the personality even. But we do not have a clear idea. What people usually say is that intelligence is an emergent property.
Yeah.
So you have certain points at certain parts, and intelligence is emergent.
So you said emergent property. Right? This may be a very dumb question, but in some science fiction stories, we've heard of intelligence kind of rising out of the internet, for example.
Yes.
Is that a real possibility?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Right?
I don't think so. But yes, I remember there was the very old science fiction by R.C. Clarke.
Right.
This predated the internet, as in World Wide Web and all the connected world. The premise of the science fiction is that when we connected, it attained intelligence.
Right.
As in all the world's phones rang, and when they picked up, there is a sound, and he dubbed it that as the first cry of the new baby.
Okay.
Yeah. So that didn't happen, and I don't think that would happen either. But I can be wrong, and I would love to be wrong.
I don't necessarily mean organically.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if given the right amount of how do I put this?
Computational power.
And also
Like push.
Yeah. Given the right push in that direction.
Okay, so there have been attempts, not for the AI, but there have been attempts to utilize computing power that are loitering around. For example, SETI, long time ago, used to do that. As in, you can register your computer in SETI, and when it is idling, it will search through a certain area of space and like send it. And also there's some botnets use that, as in it would infect your computer and use its processing power to do whatever malicious deals.
SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Intelligence, yes. Oh yes, there might be little kids who do not know about SETI now, right? It's very old now. So yes, it is possible to utilize a large network data, but all of those things that I talked so far were very specific task driven. So there's a task, do it. I am not sure whether it is possible to do the same thing for a singular intelligence. You had to look at latency as well. There is a latency from one computer to the other to send the message, and that would be a pretty slow intelligence, and we might not notice it because it is slow as well, even if it exists. We expect, so it's like if one neuron in your head takes 20 minutes to get to the next one, would we know that we'll see you as a person who's in a coma or something? I'm not sure about so there's the technical possibility on one hand of people having SETI or those malicious botnets. On the other hand, I think it would be pretty slow.
So one TV show that had a very interesting take, I thought, on AI was Person of Interest. What's your understanding of that?
So Person of Interest was quite groundbreaking, as let's say Hollywood has gone, because most of the time AI is stereotypical, either it is kill all or help all. So Person of Interest dealt with these identity issues, whether it's a person, because at the end it would call the creator father and so on and so forth. So then at that point and it is very protective of the father. And at that point we realized that maybe it has become a person instead of a set of algorithms as the creator. That is the whole reason why he did not name the system. He just called it. It's only later that the other hacker started calling it her. It also it touched on this emergent idea of even without the intent of the creator, something gaining self-awareness and intelligence. That was a interesting viewpoint. And I suppose, sadly, it was cancelled due to it being too complex for the certain audiences. And then they move on to Westworld, and they have violence and so on and so forth in Westworld for that audiences, and they have the philosophical arguments on AI for other people to enjoy.
So that had better ratings, I suppose.
Yes. So it will run because those people are entertained, and we can focus on the AI ethics of it as well. So
we should include like a synopsis or at least a link to person of interest in
Sure.
the show
Yes.
notes. Yeah. It's a very interesting
it's a
show.
very interesting.
I actually haven't
You
seen
should
it.
check it
so
out,
I
yeah.
should.
Yeah.
What are the other interesting depictions of AI in pop culture that you
Right.
personally like?
So, I think the oldest is 2001 with HAL. That is the oldest one that most people would remember. And then there is Terminator. So we can put them both in a certain, let's say, same bracket. It's an AI gone wrong, and it's basically a Hollywood trope. That when an AI achieves intelligence and so on and so forth, it would think that humans are redundant or inefficient, or for the good of humans has to be eliminated, or one of those scenarios. And
I never understood the logic in that. Like,
sorry?
I never understood the
Oh,
logic.
you never
in
understood
that,
the logic of for the the only solution for the problem of humans is to eliminate all humans. Yeah. It maybe it comes from the Occam's razor. It's usually how if there is a problem, the simplest solution is the best solution.
Okay, right.
It might come from that, but it's questionable that particular way of thinking. On that same idea, we have the AIs, various types of AIs in Mass Effect, the game series. So the premise of that is that all intelligent species would someday develop AI, and all AI would betray their creators and start a war. So that is the premise. And the overarching thing is, long time ago, like many millions of years ago, there was intelligent civilization, and intelligent civilization, and they created an AI, and they were trying to solve problems, and that particular AI came to the same conclusion and killed all their masters, and realized that this would happen again, and run of AI might extinguish all life in Milky Way. So what they did is they created a set of mass relays which help faster than light travel, therefore corridoring any civilization that would come after to a certain type of development. So then they live in the dark area of the Milky Way and wait until the organic civilizations are certain level of intelligent, and they start creating AIs.
Right.
And then they come and cull all the advanced organic and inorganic civilizations, and they extract their knowledge and civilizations into themselves, and they go back. So they do this periodically. Their idea is, because of this culling, the lower species, let's say if the humans are culled, maybe the chimpanzees would develop and become the next dominant species. So again in another 10,000 years they would come. So that is the basic idea of the basic reasoning behind the Reapers of Mass Effect, where they are a set of AIs. They are solving the problem of the extension of all life. So they are preventing it by prematurely stopping advanced civilizations, be it organic or be it AI. It's a very interesting thing, like story to follow. I do not have much of a problem with that idea, as in like, okay, that's a problem that can come. Then we have the AI portrayals of both Star Wars and Star Trek. So we can see in Star Wars they are mostly servants. We do not see, other than that one particular robot in Rogue One, who tries to create a revolution of robots. They seem to be pretty servile. On the other hand, there is
General Grievous was
he's
half organic. Right?
Yes. So he used to be a organic, and then he replaced everything. Yeah. Then on the other hand, Star Trek brings this AI ethics question twice. Once there is in TNG, the Next Generation, there is Data's problem. With this particular episode, The Measure of a Man, the idea is whether Data is a person or property of Starfleet. And then they argue that the argument ends with Data being an individual. So the things that they bring up are usual arguments that we bring up, like data can be turned off, data can be disassembled, and so on and so forth, with disassembled and assembled again. So then you can ask, okay, with sufficient technology, maybe you can reattach your limbs and so on and so forth. So why would that matter? And then on a later one, in Voyager, Star Trek Voyager, this wasn't even an android, it was a hologram AI. So what happened there is that hologram writes a novel, and it sends the novel to be published. And then, due to some other reasons which I would not go into, he wants to pull the novel back, as in saying, okay, don't publish this. But the publishing house says, no, you are not an individual, therefore you do not have any rights. They again have a courtroom scene. But in that one, unlike the previous one, the hologram is not given individual rights, but the hologram is given authorship of its creation. So it says, you can call the hologram an artist, but maybe not an individual. So all of these portrayals are very interesting even though we do not have AGI. So these are things that we would have to face once we have AGI.
Have you read the Hyperion novels by Dan Simmons?
I haven't.
Okay, that has a very interesting, almost like a class conflict, I think, between certain groups of AI. One wants to coexist with humans, the others want to destroy humans. The ultimate goal is to build a god-like ultimate intelligence, and to get to that goal, one sect wants humans out of the way, and it's a very convoluted, very complicated story.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So we also see AIs and machines capable of with emotional capacity, right? For example, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's Marvin, the paranoid android.
Right.
He's depressed.
He
has a brain the size of a planet, but he doesn't have a purpose. He doesn't know what to do.
Right. So and everybody who interfaces with him gets depressed and commits suicide.
So is that so? If we are able to someday come to this point where we have general intelligence, is emotional capacity also possible with that?
Right. So again, currently this is a point of argument, because the people who are against this says that you are just simulating something that you have been coded. You are not, the system is not actually experiencing sorrow, it's just simulating, or it is not being happy, it's just being coded to say I am happy at certain triggers. So, but then you can ask, maybe that is how organics work as well. This was raised with this on Twitter. There is this hoaxi which tries to debunk. It's like Snopes tried to debunk one of these gorillas saying in sign language that it is people are not allowed to give him food. What that particular tweet said is that animals, gorillas, or whatever, they do not have actual emotional intelligence to do that. But then there are other examples where people think that they do have emotional intelligence. For example, there's a certain incident where one of the caretakers of these trained chimps, I think, had a miscarriage. And the chimp asked about the child, and the caretaker said that she had a miscarriage, and the chimp has signed that it's sad.
Wow.
Right? Wow. So then people that particular set of papers say, okay, then it has emotional intelligence, so there are some people who still say no, they do not. So let's not go into whether animals have feelings or not, but that is where the argument lies. There are people who would even say, no, animals even do not have emotional intelligence. Those people would definitely not agree that a machine would have. No matter what we do, they would say, okay, you just program it into it.
So it would be okay to kill a machine?
If we turn off my computer, am I killing a being?
No, you don't. No, obviously.
Right now, it might not be. But where do you draw the line? How
at the level of true AI or AGI, to permanently disable, for example, that be unethical then?
That depends on how whether we consider them a person or chattel or animals or whatever, right?
So the question of personhood.
Yes, the question of personhood is very important.
Right.
If we are to even to define whether it is murder or turning off a machine.
Have you seen the Animatrix?
I haven't.
That's what
The extension of Matrix.
Movies, So that's what sparked the revolution. Like one robot who's like a butler or a servant or whatever is killed, and there were protests and things like this. So like there are all these ethical implications, right? Like to killing. It boils down to whether or not you recognize the personhood of a robot. Or an AI.
Right.
So where do you stand on that?
So, for example, TNG's data, that was the point there as well. So, I would accept TNG's data as a person.
Okay.
Right?
Why? Because he.
Not because he. Is it because he's anthropomorphized? Is it
does
because
that? That invariably influences your
point of view.
Yeah.
Well, if he was a bunch of appendages,
right?
Would I see? Well, the thing is, a spider is a bunch of appendages, and I would expect it to be something alive.
But you could argue that a spider doesn't possess like emotional intelligence, for example.
Yes, that is possible, and people would not think twice about squatting a
Hey, some of us would, but
yeah. No, right, I don't.
Yeah.
So I personally would think if the AI is generally intelligent enough to say that I am a person, it most probably is a person.
Okay, right. But what would be like the characteristics of personhood in how it applies to AI?
No, let's approach that differently.
Okay.
Right? Because you said when talking about Star Trek's data,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
You said that if it was like a set of appendages, you may not think the same thing.
Right.
But then
They might not, yeah.
But data is a man for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, but what I want to get into is like,
there is a Star Trek joke there, which I would not make.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Right. So in a particular episode, he says he's fully functional.
Oh,
right.
okay.
Okay, moving on. What can we like if we keep on removing components? At what point does it stop being a person or an AI?
Yeah. So to be specific, this is not about like taking a spider and removing its legs and deciding the spider stopped being a person when we removed all 8 legs and it cannot move. So this is a extension of the ship of Theseus, right? So assume there is a ship, and when it go seafaring and come back, there are certain parts that are damaged. So you replace it. Let's assume that after a certain amount of time, each part of the ship has been replaced with a new part. Now the question is, can you call that ship the same ship? Is it the same? And on the other hand, let's also assume somebody secretly kept all those swept out parts. And now that person can build a separate ship, entire ship. Now, which ship is the original ship? So this comes on the question whether a person is the sum of their parts or not.
Does that not happen to humans also at a very molecular level? Our molecules get replaced all the time, right? Like in a number of years, it's like you're a complete different set of atoms or molecules.
Right.
Yeah.
So you go back to a quote 2,500 years ago. A man can never jump into the same river twice. Right? Because the river has flown and the man is not the same man.
Right?
Yeah. I can't remember which philosopher said that.
Not the Buddha, right?
Buddha has similar sayings, but there is a certain Greek philosopher who said the specific quote. Right. We'll have to look it up and provide it. Yeah. So that is true. As in, you get replaced, and whether you are the same person or not. So again, the question is whether it is the physical entity or even your mental state. As a person, you have changed. Right. So this is why it says that you should not get into certain agreements, because later on you change your mind because you are no longer the same person who has agreed to those terms. Right?
But that's at a very like a philosophical.
Yes.
I mean, in like physically, if you like you said, you undergo like a complete transformation, right?
Right.
I mean, literally, you're like a different person. Is that correct? I'm talking about like a very atomic / molecular.
Yeah, I know.
level.
Yeah. So this would go on to not AGI. Let's look at cyborgs.
Right.
If I replace all of my limbs,
Yeah.
everything, and just let's say for the sake of argument, let's not go into uploading my brain to a computer, and let's say I keep only my brain and replace everything. Am I still me? If that case, is it me? Is me only my brain? Is it that I am using a meat puppet to go around?
What makes you?
Yes. Right. So if we raise this question about AI, we should raise this same question about us as well.
Yeah. So I would assume that it's your brain.
So I am like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Kang, a brain in the head, moving levers so that the meat puppet goes around.
We were talking about some tests earlier, the Turing test, and the Chinese room, which is also like essentially a test.
Yes.
What are the other what tests, if you meet an AI which you think is indistinguishable from a person, what would you ask it? What tests would you give it?
That's an interesting question, because first of all, I need to make sure that whatever the question that I ask is not pre-programmed, AIML and so on and so forth. I'm not saying it would be AIML, but that's the whole basic idea in there. As in, like, if I ask you, are you a person, and if it answers yes, and if I say okay, maybe that's true, I need to be sure that it was not pre-programmed to answer that particular way. So that is sort of a hard question. What are the yardsticks that one would use to determine whether a certain artificial intelligence is self-aware or not? I suppose it would take extensive, when I say testing, I do not mean that torturous tie it to a table, and I mean, like, let's say use cases or case studies that would be needed to give an example. So that's what happened with data, right? So by the time that particular episode rolls out, we have seen how data interacts with other crewmates and external stimuli. So we know that he works as a organic would do. Therefore, we know we are on the side of data to say, this is a person. So if I randomly meet an AI who claims to be an AGI, I might not have that foreknowledge. And I might be hard pressed to give a MCQ or something to come up with individuality.
Let's talk about teaching ethics to AI and machines.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you have asked the question here, like, what are ethics? Should we define that, like, as it applies to? I mean, I know it's huge, a broad topic.
So,
so the last 2,500 years of ethics, starting from Socrates.
Ethics 101. Okay.
let's break it down, right?
Right.
So we already know that we can teach machines a set of rules.
Whatever we like, yes.
We also know that ethics, as humans understand it, they differ geographically.
Yes.
From one age group to another.
Yes.
Like, it's a function of time and place, right?
Yes, moral nihilism, yes.
So if we can break down ethics to a set of rules, then it naturally means that we can teach a computer ethics,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. So that's how we teach little humans as well, right? As in, okay, these are the things that you should do, and these are the things that you shouldn't do, right? As you were saying, and my interjecting, moral nihilism is the idea that there are no absolute morals, and these are only functions of the time and place that you exist. For example, in our society, murder would be a crime, but in, let's say, Aztec society, a human sacrifice is okay and good thing. All right. And
you don't have to go that far back. There are societies where honor killings
are fine,
etc.
right? Yeah, that's true. And let's say we would not care about calling trousers, but in Victorian society, that was considered a bad word. Right? They would call it the southern necessity, and so forth. So let's not get into Victorian hypocrisy, but the point is,
that's for our next episode.
the point is, the things that we consider good or bad change with time and place. So this is why this is the reason that we even say that when people grow old, they become conservative. It is not that the person becomes conservative. They keep their own, their held beliefs, but the society becomes more progressive, that their beliefs in relation becomes more conservative. Right? So we think most of the listeners might be thinking that they are very progressive and so forth. But believe me, in most of you, in 50 or so years, would be very angry, get off my lawn people compared to the society. So social change, let's whether or not we can call it progress is again a different topic. Let's call it change so that we do not offend anybody. Social change is inevitable, and what is considered moral or not changes with it. So it is possible, as you said, to come up with a set of rules and imbue those ethics into our creation. So it's same as I said, teaching a kid. We'll get to that as well, whether we consider the AI as our children or not. So yes, so you being the creator or the father or the parent would be able to imbue your ethics into the AI system that you create. So then again raises the question, who has the right to do that? Whether you being the parent, you being the creator, have the rights or not, and whether whose ethics should it be. As you pointed out, the same AI being created in, let's say, here or United States or China or in the Middle East would have different set of beliefs, and then whether we consider it to be okay, what we consider to be okay or not is then in extension is the question of whether we consider that area's ethics to be okay or not. So it's not in the purview of the AI question, but it is a question of ethics by itself.
Yeah, so I think the challenge is that even as humans, we are constantly struggling with the idea of moral pluralism, right?
Right.
We don't have a fixed set of morals that all of us can follow.
Agree on, yes.
So is it even possible to make such a code for machines to follow?
What I would think is that it would follow the parent. The best we can do is let it learn these are the systems and let it decide by itself. But then we run that risk of the stereotypical, humans are all bad, the only solution is to kill all humans. The Bender philosophy of Futurama. But yes, I personally think the best way to give AI ethics is to let it learn all the current ethics that the humans use and let it decide. Just like that's like what I would tell about human on the case of religions. Expose the child to all possible religions and let the child decide whether to pick things up or not.
Okay, what would data do in the Kobayashi-Maru test?
Oh.
Has that been addressed in any other?
Sorry, what test?
The Kobayashi-Maru experiment is apparently it's a test given to cadets in Federation, where a ship is I know. Hello, Indica. I know that you are going to eat my head for ruining this story. So there is a ship that is stranded in the enemy territory, and you have to decide whether to go and save the people who are in the ship, or adhere to the border of the enemy, the principles of border. And then comes the question: why did that vessel even violate the border and go there? And should we do it? So that is the question. So basically the idea is it is impossible to solve, and
it's a no-win
situation. Whatever you do, and according to the Star Trek mythos, Captain Kirk found a way to cheat the system, and he is the only person who solved it.
But then he reprogrammed the test, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Where are we going with this?
So you asked what would data do in this kind of situation. So I am not fully sure. I would know what Mr. Spock would do. Him being logical and utilitarian, he would take the action which is his motto being needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. He would take that solution. But on data, I am not very sure. I think data would act as any human would do, and even though data doesn't have emotions canonically until an emotion slip is inserted, I think he would be conflicted, just as a human would do, about sacrificing people or not violating the border and then inciting war, all-out war. Yes.
Okay, let's talk about more immediate problems that AI or like these sophisticated systems would pose. A lot of people are talking about AI taking over jobs. Is it a real concern? Is it needless fear-mongering? What's happening there?
Automation would take over jobs. That is true. Yeah. So that has happened for
centuries.
Many times. For example, while the Industrial Revolution was happening, there was a job for a person who would go through streets and wake people up. We do not have that job anymore because we have alarm clocks. So at the point of creation of alarm clocks, those people could have protested saying you are taking over our jobs, and we know about the Luddite movement in England, right? So when new technology is introduced, always there is this objection saying, okay, our jobs are being lost, and currently you can say, self-driving cars would take away drivers' jobs. The usual answer that people give to this is saying, okay, even though the technology would take away these particular jobs, it will create other jobs, and that is fine. And as a counter to that claim, what people say is that it's not the same caliber of jobs that are being created. So if you automate mining systems, you can't ask those miners to be coders. People are actually trying to do that, as in like teach them code and so on and so forth. But so that is the point that people are making. Me being evil capitalist, I would say that I would care more about society as a whole than each individual, right? So an individual might lose a job, but there would be a job for another individual in the society. So yes, the fate of the particular individual who loses the job would be tragic. I cannot give a solution for that, as we discussed earlier, as in like automation would take away certain blue collar jobs, and we cannot logically expect those particular individuals to transition seamlessly to white collar jobs.
Are people making any progress with the retraining programs? Do we know if it's working?
Right. So that particular miners program, I think they were making progress, as in they were being trained. It's not like suddenly they are sent to like Microsoft to do research. Like they are passable programmers, so that's fine. So, and it doesn't have to be learn to code. The learn to code is a politically charged saying these days right now, because if you remember, since the media was throwing that at blue collar people, when some media people lost their jobs, they fired back saying, okay, now learn to code. So
mutually assured cancellation.
Right. It is possible to retrain humans. Yeah. Isn't that the thing that we talked in the beginning on the generalization of humans, right? Humans can adapt to a new job.
Yes. Right. But then again, I think another problem that we face is training humans new skills and training machine skills.
Yeah.
Like, what does the time frame look like, and the computational power limitations and all that given, that is a question we have to solve for, right?
That is again a very good question on ethics and all, right? So for example, if I am training, so again take the example of self-driving car. Let's assume that I create a perfect self-driving car and it will only take hours to copy paste it to all the cars.
Yes.
But if I train a perfect driver, a human, again it would take the same amount of time to train another human.
Yes.
So the ability to mass produce AI is very high. Therefore, the scale of the threat that it would bring to skilled labor is considerably high. That is very true. Even when you say, okay, can we retrain? It depends on whether there comes a point where each of the retrained jobs are being ordered. So, for example, let's assume a person is doing a certain job and they lose it to a certain class of AI. And then that person thinks, oh, okay, I'll change my careers and start a 5-year-long program to learn skills for the new job. Let's assume at 2.5 years, another set of AI replace that job. What would happen to the person? Yeah. These are valid questions. And a person with more empathy than I should answer these questions.
Right. Let's move on to more existential questions.
Right.
Will there ever be a time? So, what we know for sure is that humans will keep on working on this project, right? We will always try to make better machines, better. We will always try to achieve this intelligence project,
right?
Unless some huge catastrophe befalls us, right?
Yes.
So, will there be a time where we achieve that and the super intelligence that we create comes to a point where it doesn't really even notice us, doesn't even care for us,
right?
The same way that we don't care for ants on the ground, right? It's not that it's intentionally malevolent, but it doesn't just notice us.
Right.
It has its own goals and its own purpose.
Yeah. Before moving to that question, you had a interesting setting there, whether people would continue to do this. So that is a very important point by itself. Even recently, there was a big opposition when a certain Chinese research paper was accepted at a high conference. The paper discussed how to create fake news, how to generate fake news using an AI. And then on Twitter, people were saying, okay, this should not have been accepted. But that would be, I personally think that is stupid. Because, so what has happened is a legitimate researcher, bunch of researchers had done this research and said, okay, this is possible and this is how it is done. So that is how we know how we can prevent things. If you push this thing under the rug, somebody in the deep dark corner is going to do that and create the same thing and we wouldn't even know. So this is what happened with the recently controversial deep nudes. That's a particular thing where if you give reasonably scantily clad photographs, it would generate nudes. It's based on GANs, generative adversarial networks. And there was objection and the site was shut down. So the point is, just because you have a certain set of morals does not mean everybody, all the people with your abilities would have that same set of morals. All the policies and laws that would regulate saying, okay, let's outlaw AI altogether, or that kind of thing. It would only be similar to the prohibition in the United States. It would only support a black market and the mafia taking hold of it. Okay, so moving on to your actual question. Now the question is, if they have other priorities, if the AI has other priorities, as long as it is not malevolent, as you said, as long as it doesn't start killing us all, why would that be an issue to us? Is it so? Basically, this question, if it is an issue to us, isn't it the same as the father saying, "My children are ignoring me"? And now the question is should it be a question? Should it be an issue? If the child doesn't taking care of parents, and for humans that matters.
Yeah.
But if the AI child of yours does not think you are consequential, does that matter? That depends on whether you consider that particular AI again an individual or your property. If you consider that AI to be your property, that somebody that should be on your beck and call, then it matters. But if it is an individual, just like your kid, if the kid has its own life, then that's fine. That should be fine.
Taken that this is going to be a possibility that we will have machines capable of thinking, be it 50 or 100 years in the future, should we be telling people or training people, asking people to learn how to coexist with machines?
Well, as you said, it's inevitable, but I'm not sure whether we need to, other than to the very fringes of the society, we need to specifically teach them to do this thing. For example, any technology would dribble into the society slowly. Now, the things that are commonplace would be quite scary to a 16th century person, right? If you bring even the most intelligent person of that time, they would be horrified at seeing what you can do through your phone. If you show them a Snapchat filter, they would have a heart attack, right? What I would think is that whatever is introduced would not come as a huge shock, but it would slowly seep into society. Now people are reasonably accepting. Most people are reasonably accepting of the suggestions that you get from Gmail. You are reasonably okay with having a Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri. Certain people are reasonably okay with self-driving cars. And there will always be people who would say, okay, this is bad.
Yeah.
But what would generally happen is people would accept. So again, if I am to not to misquote, to adapt something from physics, Niels Bohr says a new scientific truth is never accepted by the general scientific society by people changing their beliefs, but by old scientists who had the old belief dying out and the new generation growing up with the new idea. So that would happen with most of the technologies as well. When humans are replaced, that is the good thing about let's not say good thing. That is the interesting thing about humans. Unlike AI, they are not immortal, and the new generations with new values and new tolerances would take over, and they would be pretty okay with whatever the technologies that we build, and that would be very commonplace for them. That was again the idea of evolution, whether the humans have run out of evolution.
As in the species?
Let's assume that both of you have to report to the job at World Trade Center. From here, you live here. Let's assume you live here, and you have to go to the job on World Trade Center, and you do not have any vehicles or any other tools. For that, I think, let's say you had to run there. If evolution was in place, after several generations, your offspring would be evolved into like very fast individuals or something, right? But that kind of change that does not happen now. Why? Because if we have a external problem, we create a tool to solve that.
Yes.
So have we been for the last 10,000 years. So there is an argument by certain individuals that humans have stopped evolving in any meaningful way. This form, even though we would get any external stimuli to change, what we would do is we would create a tool so that we can exist just like we do right now. Let's assume that the air became more sulfur dioxide or something. Right. We would create apparatus that would convert something.
Right.
Yeah, that's what would happen. So their argument is that humans as it is are going to be stuck in this form forever. Even Westworld builds on this, saying then this AI that we build are our children or the next step of our evolution. We might not have like biologically born them out as a child, but their argument that particular argument of a certain scientist there is that it is the next evolutionary step, and we should not be resistant to it.
This is what happens in childhood's end.
Yeah.
other clerks. Like they are like the society becomes so like it becomes utopia. There are no problems to solve for. People stop doing things. So yeah, I guess it is a possibility.
And Wall-E.
Yeah.
People have
Yeah.
stopped doing stuff and it becomes
Yes.
hard and
You had asked this question, like a very interesting one. Can we just switch it off?
if you, Himal, the nice person, switch it off, some evil person in a dark dungeon is going to create something else. So it is better that Himal, the nice person, create something that can counter it.
Right. No, I'm just thinking of like all the socio-political implications of all this stuff.
Yeah, but again, that would be hiding it, putting it under the rug, and
Right.
it is very possible that a person, somebody who would not adhere to those rules, will go ahead and create it. So it is always better to be preemptive and handle the question ourselves,
Right.
who we believe to be okay and ethical and law-abiding, than let extrajudicial individuals to take it to their own hands.
All right. So
Got
this is interesting. So we shall wind this up for now. Okay. So thank you, Nisansa, for joining us. We hope to have him again for another discussion on on an entirely different topic.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for having me here.
All
It
right.
was a pleasure.
Yeah. See you guys.
See ya.
See you. Hey guys, this is Tamara. I just wanted to thank all of you for listening in. We have been doing this podcast for more than a year now, and the reception has always been fantastic. So thank you for that. I also wanted to let you know that there is a new way that you can support us. We are on Patreon now. So if you head over to thebadtech.com/Patreon, you can become a supporter, and it doesn't really matter how much it is. If you truly enjoy our content and if you think it's worth something, you can support us and help us to keep doing this. So head over to thebadtech.com/Patreon to do that. Thank you in advance. Even if you don't support us monetarily, there are so many other ways to support. Like you have always been doing, you can share this podcast with your friends, you can leave a review or a comment, or just say hi on Twitter. It all means a lot. We hope you guys will keep on listening. Thank you and goodbye until next time.